before we start, I would like to introduce our brilliant panelists. So we are here. So I'm like very briefly, I'm Lorraine Danglejean. I'm acting director for our Western North Africa region at IDinsight. And I'm here with Ben, who is the Full Spectrum Coalition study coordinator and a mixed method researcher. His work engaged with community understanding of children, children rights, and children protection in particular. And we are very happy to have him today. I'm also here with Tita Alvira. She's a senior liaison officer at Legado. She's an environmental scientist and a community development practitioner with deep expertise in participatory research and indigenous community partnerships across Latin America and East Africa. We have Gannon, who is a senior advisor for Full Spectrum Coalition and who has over 20 years of experience working with social change organization in Africa and across the world, and currently senior advisor for leading community-focused organizations. And he's also co-chair of the Shifting the Funding Paradigm Working Group. Francesca Monetti is a senior advisor for the strategy and program at Tostan, which is one of the key organizations leading this coalition, and she builds strategy for scaling transformative social changes and develop partnerships that empower women, girls, and entire network of communities. And finally, Christina is coming from One Village Partner. She is a monitoring, evaluation, and learning advisor, and she partners with organizations to advance evidence-informed, equitable, and sustainable development through participatory evaluation and adaptive learning. And with this, I'm giving the floor to Ben, who is going to set the stage for us about this study initiative. Ben, over to you.
Thank you. And I don't know exactly who decided to embellish our PowerPoint slides with a blue line, but thank you very much. They look so much better now. So we're going to talk today to you for an hour. I am Italian, so I have a tendency speaking pretty fast. So if I'm going as a bullet train, just put it in the chat, and you'll give me a gift to slow down a little bit. So we're going to talk to you about a little bit today about what we believe, what we call holistic community-led development, 365, so to speak, holistic community-led development. And that's really what informed the name Full Spectrum. We believe that when we talk of full spectrum development, we are talking about a community-led development approach that embraces, as this slide says, areas ranging from human rights and responsibility, the Sustainable Development Goals, or the areas of human well-being and flourishing included in the SDGs, and very importantly, encompasses principle of dignity, respect, inclusion, and non-discrimination. So it's not just about the outcomes, but it is as much, if not even more, actually, about the process, the humanizing, as I like to call it, the humanizing process in which the dignity of the participants or the leaders really is respected. Let's move to the next slide, potentially. And as you move to the next slide, Lorraine, something that I actually, you know what, I'll draw something now. Something that we really draw that we like to imagine and envision. I'll draw on top of these words so that you're not tempted to read them. Is that we see the approach as being, you know, a series of engagement with communities, but in a way, if this is time, well, the engagement of the organization, the partner organization, is diminishing over time. So at the beginning, there might be a big role of the intervening organization, then a medium role, then over time it disappears. And then on the other side, we have the opposite movement. At the beginning, the community might be hesitant. They're used potentially to top-down approaches. Throughout the program, they're full partners. And eventually, they're really the leaders of their own development. So if you need to bring home one thing, I suggest you bring home this. other things that really unite these three organizations, which is why we all coming together in the study about which we'll tell you a little bit, is that we all work, as I said, on community-led development. We are the organizations are inclusive. They do not make, it's not just about, you know, a performative, oh, we don't exclude anyone, but it's an active engagement to invite people who wouldn't normally connect to sit down and examine their social reality to understand the collective problems and identify common strategy to solve those problems. And then the third aspect of this, the shared experiences, the holistic nature of the process. There is no siloed requirement for communities to work on health, right? These are not organizations that come in and say, well, you can do what you want, but at the end of the day, you need to do what I want you to do. Within the framework of the work, really the potential of this work is to increase human beings and their environments, to create social and physical environments where human beings can thrive fully. Next slide, Lorraine, please. So I think this is a rich slide, and I'm not going to read through all of it, but what I really would like you to focus on is that first bolded word, social transformation. What all these programs have in common, and that's why they kind of clustered naturally together as if attracted or as gravitational in each other's gravitational pull, is the accent on the transformation. I would even say the imagining new ways of being together and making decisions together. I don't know where you live. I currently live in Milan, but before I lived in a small village in Spain, and nobody actually came to me and said, hey, have you ever considered the way you're making decisions in this village? Do you feel that your voice is represented? Are you satisfied with it? What is your vision for the village, right? In a way, when I lived there, I inherited and I was socialized into decision-making mechanism that then I would probably transmit it to the next generation. Social transformation then speaks to the capacity to the conscious effort of coming together and saying, how are we actually interacting? How are we, what does it mean to be authentic about the ways in which the existing status quo is making me suffer? And what is the potential then to transform that status quo? Next slide. So the Full Spectrum Coalition is bigger than the study that I coordinate. My role is specifically on the study. The study reunites Tostan, Legado, and One Village partners, the three organizations that are represented in this call today by Tita, Christina, and Francesca. Includes external support from IDinsight, that Lorraine works for, and the IDS, the Institute of Development Studies. Marina couldn't be here today, but that's the external support in terms of providing external evaluation and increasing, obviously, the objectivity and neutrality of the findings. This study moves forward in phases, and you will hear in a little bit about the phases of the study. And I'll stop there because I don't want to spoil what comes next. But next slide, please. I will now put forward my last two slides. The first one is about the study objectives, maybe 2-3 slides, and then we talk about research questions. For those of you who find this language a bit clunky, the idea is that the study objectives in general, why are we doing this whole thing? And the research question is, what are the actual questions that we are asking as part of the study? The objective of this study range across a variety of audiences, and we could almost match each of these objectives to a different audience if you want. But the first one is really, as I could read it to you, I mean, I'll read it to you. Understand and evaluate the impact of the holistic community-led development approach in ways that support decision-making by policymakers and resource holders. So that really speaks to the potential of helping policymakers and resource holders, foundations, wealth individuals, anyone who canalizes resources of different types, not necessarily money, to make decisions based on, wow, this stuff is really powerful. How can I integrate it in what I do? The second one is the deepened understanding of how holistic community-led development works. which is really what we want to do in the study. It's not much about what does this result in. I mean, yes, there will be that, but it will be a lot about why and how are people feeling about it, and how is this actually helping them awaken and flourish to what's inside themselves. The third one is expand the scope of the research to incorporate also the for whom outcomes, about which we'll say in a minute. And the last one is to expand through the findings, the reach of the approach across more communities, really in the hope of creating a global movement for positive change across a variety of settings and countries. Next slide. I know you're getting bored with my voice, but very soon it will be, you will hear someone else speaking as excited, if not more than me. So I mentioned we will have research questions, and in a second I'll tell you a little bit about research question 5, and then I'll pass it on. But really these are our 5 research questions. The first one is about the how and the why. How does this work and why? The second is, what are the fundamental principles of the program design? If you think about it, and I'll be done in 30 seconds, but if you think about it, usually you have studies that focus on one program. Well, what happens is that then you know what that program worked, but deriving insights might be a challenge that is biased by the very real contextual characteristics of the program. Instead, operating in the other way, comparing 3 programs and then deriving insight is incredibly helpful and new as an approach. So then, as a realist will say, we will understand the condition under which the program achieves a sustainable scale, how different actors define success, what is success for women, for men, for religious leaders, for children, for the organizations. And then the fifth, on which I'm going to spend 10 seconds so that we can skip the next slide, it's really understanding the relational dynamics. It's partly self-reflective, right, between organization and community members. Is there an unconscious, potentially, directionality that is given, or how do organizations resist and check themselves against that potentially that some people would describe as colonial desire in the mind to lead development, but the same as well among community members, where there might be cooptation dynamics, and finally between communities and other actors in their ecosystem, like the police or the other services. I'll then skip the next couple of slides because I think I'm done with my time. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thanks so much, Ben, for setting the stage for us. We're going to start this discussion with discussing, a focus on the research challenge, and I'd like Gannon to share a little bit his perspective. So, Gannon, you've worked with social change organization across Africa for over 2 decades. I've described that. And despite this experience and the growing interest in community-led development, I think we still lack robust comparative evidence across multiple programs. So can you share with us what makes this study uniquely positioned to address this evidence gap, and why is the evidence critical now?
Thanks, Lorraine. I'll start by saying it's really a joy to be on a call. You're complimenting us as panelists. It's very nice, but I'm looking at the list of people in the room and noticing what an amazing gathering this is. People working at all different levels and across so many different dimensions of this work to support communities on their journey, which is what this has always been about, no matter how it got talked about. Yeah, so this challenge, there is a persistent challenge in generating evidence around holistic approaches. And I think we can start by just, as Ben was hinting at, the typical policy, the typical program design that will tend to be limited to a specific silo or a sector, or even a very niche piece of that. And then very often also limited to a specific stakeholder group, or again, even a niche within the stakeholder group. All of that for good reason in many instances, but it means that if you have a model that's intentionally trying to contribute to a broad range of stakeholders across many dimensions, those kinds of models in that traditional way of doing measurement are going to be undervalued, underused, and maybe even in some cases invisible, because they're just not even sort of on the radar. In other words, you're going to often miss the multidimensional nature of these models that you find in what we call holistic community-led development. I also think that we should notice that there's a parallel gap, right? So there's this kind of measurement gap, but then there's also a practice gap. I've had the joy of speaking with many groups in my career, and then especially in the last couple of years as this coalition has been shaping. I would describe them as organizations that are doing this kind of work, or very often wanting to or trying to do this kind of work, more holistic, more multi-sectoral, more community-led. And to be very blunt, if you're a small organization in, let's say, rural West Africa, doing this kind of work is very hard. Many orgs can't do it, not because they don't have the capacity, but because they don't find allies, they don't find support, they don't find funding. And there's also a very strong paradigm around the ways that we do our work. And as one person said to me a few years ago, after they learned about some of these models, they literally said, I didn't know we were allowed to work this way. So it's this intuitive way of working, right? That you're betting on people, betting on communities, following their leads. For many people, that's very intuitive, but our systems have been built to the contrary. So to answer your question, why are we in this initiative well positioned? I think it's because you have different programs working in different contexts that are generating similar and connected outcomes, development outcomes, and that have now identified this common process. It's the basis of communities reaching those outcomes. If you wouldn't mind, maybe we can just quickly put up the theory of change that has been generated through this collaboration. So this is a multi-organizational understanding of what these social transformative processes look like. Sorry, I'm just switching here. So I'll say a few things about this, but let me frame it overall by saying we can notice that this theory of change spans social transformation, governance, and human development outcomes. And it's, again, speaking to what Ben mentioned, this coalition in a broader sense, and this evidence and learning initiative is really interested not only in what is happening, but how results get reached by communities and how processes accompany or support communities on their journeys. So it goes beyond the outcomes that are achieved and really is about unpacking further than that to be much more useful. I'll just say a few comments about the theory of change that I think are worth mentioning in a context like this. Very intentionally, this is a metaphor, right? This is a natural metaphor that's been chosen by the organizations. It's a tree. And part of the feeling around that is that the tree, when it's a seed or an acorn or at the very early stage, it has everything it needs in the seed. Seeds don't need engineering from the outside. They don't need to be designed. They already have contained in them a huge potentiality. And we feel very much like communities are in that same spirit. They already have this huge potential, and it's about how do we support that in a way that meets their vision and their needs and their potential. We should notice that this is a circular metaphor, right? It's kind of hard to see, but we're not seeing this as a simple diagram, like starting with bad situation, arrow, good situation, story's over, everybody goes home. This is iterative, connective, multidimensional change, right? So there's lots of things going on. Some things have their time and their place and then come to fruition and then eventually kind of maybe quiet down and then get churned into something else and new people come in. This is a very human, in a way, even though it's a natural plant-based metaphor. It's a kind of way to capture this human sense. And the other reason we like the tree is if you think of, if I ask, what's the perfect tree, right? It's kind of almost a silly question, right? Because every tree is growing into an environment. It's becoming a potential that's needed in that place, in that time. There is no abstract perfect tree. There is no like abstractly designed tree that you can kind of drop around the world. All of those will be inherently different from community to community, from partnership to partnership. And so it's I guess the word that comes to mind across all of this is agency, right? All of these are models, and this this common theory of change is really acknowledging the centrality of agency, and then looking at how programs or processes support the emergence of community leaders, of community groups, and then partnerships out and beyond that. You asked about the urgency of these approaches. I can't think of a way to overstate the urgency of these approaches for community's sake, but also for the global movement, the moment we're in. I hear a lot of people prognosticating, making predictions about the end of aid, that there's new systems coming, there's all kinds of, conjecture. None of them are saying we need to get less efficient, less effective, and less sustainable. And I think this way of working offers us a very powerful complement. It's not a replacement for traditional development. It's a complement to the solutions-focused model. And I think that it could create such an incredible opportunity to invest in the people who, as I kind of commented earlier, have always held and will always hold development from the inside out. I'm gonna stop there.
Thank you. Thanks, Gannon, and thanks for sharing these perspective on this challenge and why this is the right moment. So our next part of discussion is about the research design and innovation, and we want to dig a bit deeper into some of the research questions that Ben described earlier. And before we dig into this, I'm giving a very quick preview of what we are thinking in terms of research design. So at IDinsight, I spend a lot of time evaluating complex program and intervention across West Africa and the continent. And we've been fortunate to work with Tostan for a long time, including on how to evaluate program of this kind. And this student choose not to use a randomized control trial design. I want to share a little bit more on the methodological reasoning here and how this group is envisioning a mixed method approach while generating credible evidence for diverse stakeholders. And so one element is this is extremely difficult to randomize program like the one that Legado, One Village partner, and Tostan are implementing, because a big element is about spillover effects, community engagement, and as soon as you start thinking about these, you actually want this to happen in your program, and you don't want that to happen in a randomized control trial. And so that just makes this approach not really appropriate. There is also a strong element of identifying the right communities and the right partners. And so a randomization is not necessarily a good fit within this respect. What we've been thinking also is a triangle of appropriateness, user need, and ethics when considering what method or mixed message would work best. And what we are thinking in terms of how to approach this study design is that we are taking a three-phase approach. We are now in a preparative phase where we're really thinking deep about the theory of change, the common theory of change that is across these different organizations. What are the specifics? What are the common? Then we'll go to the core data collection, and then we have an explanatory phase. And this is super important for us that we integrate quantitative pre-post surveys, longitudinal qualitative data, and comparison to other geographies, so that creates credible evidence across the board. We are thinking about a sample size considering between 50 to 80 communities in 3 countries. So that just gives you a very quick idea of how we are thinking about these. And we are still early stage, so we welcome any ideas or suggestion in this. I'm also going to skip very quickly. So these 2 first research questions are one about the how and the why, because Ben described that quite a lot. and also regarding the relational dynamics that have been touched upon, because I want to take a little bit more time for wait. Yeah, for my colleague Tita to come on board and speak about these two research questions in particular. So Tita, please. We know that Legado works with indigenous and local communities using a 360 degree approach to community-led development. And I'd like to hear your thought about how do you expect this comparative study to help you understand which fundamental principles of your approach are universal versus what is context specific, and in particular around environmental and conservation outcome. So can you share a little bit for this group?
Thank you, Lorraine. Cool. Everybody hear me? Yeah. Yeah, thank you for your insightful question, and I really appreciate the space to participate here and share more about our work and our collaborative work here. And I want to start first by mentioning that at Legado, we defined 360 community-led development as an approach that, very well said by Ben and Gannon at the beginning, is this an approach that centers communities at the drivers of their own development while addressing, this is what the full spectrum of their strengths, priorities, and needs. And this 360-degree view really framing signals as a holistic, integrative, and inclusive perspective, recognizing that there is no silos really. There's no silos in the way people think, in the way people live. So silos such as health, education, or environment, these silos don't operate in isolation. And I have personally seen this approach work across a range of sociocultural contexts, but I think the opportunity here is incredible because is that through comparative data informed analysis, we could really do this together with three organizations. And this initiative really offers a unique change, a unique chance, sorry, my Spanish, to validate, refine, and learn from different expressions of community-led development around the world. And in this study, we recognize that community-led change is fundamental. But what we're trying to really understand is what exactly makes it work. What are the key design elements that consistently drive successful implementation? Which components are critical to activating the core mechanisms of change? So for example, we really want to know, is it the way that people come into the room? Is it the way that people are being invited to these discussions and reflections? Is the facilitator's experience? Or is it the way that we sequence and plan we call it in Legado, the roadmap or the process? Is it the fact that we talk about issues intersectionally? So we really want to know what is that transformative moment that we call the secret sauce that truly shifts dynamics. And all of us involved in the study share a belief that identifying these fundamental principles will really lead to actionable insights for strengthening and optimizing community-led development models, and invite others to continue doing this. We also recognize that it's a major challenge, because we're measuring interconnected, multidimensional outcomes, as Gannon was saying at the beginning. Also, we know that monitoring and evaluation systems are often siloed and still grounded in colonial paradigms that don't really reflect the lived realities of the communities that we collaborate with. So that's why we're especially excited to draw on the expertise of the Full Spectrum Coalition members, IDinsight and IDS, to really help develop these robust ways to analyze qualitative data and design measurement framework that reflect this complexity and context. At Legado, we have seen the power of interconnected outcomes and how communities really respond to interventions that reflect the whole of their lives. That's this 360 that I was talking about. But really, the real question is, how do we measure this complexity meaningfully? How can we create metrics that actually reflect what is really happening on the ground? And that is why conducting this work in collaboration across diverse organizations is so critical. And it really allows us to learn, to test, to iterate on what works in different contexts, while really remaining grounded in our shared commitment to holistic community-led transformation, social transformation that Ben was talking at the beginning. This study will help us understand which element of our model, particularly elements that all of the three organizations in the study share, show commonalities in impact across the different contexts, will be Senegal, Sierra Leone, rural and semi-urban, or here in Legado, Peru, or Kenya. And this will help us understand which components of the approach are really universal, those that work everywhere, and which are specific to a certain context. This is key for both social and environmental outcomes, and what can we assume will happen everywhere and what is contextually a driven outcome. We know that these kind of outcomes take time, and that can be at odds with funder expectations, like for quick results. But we are totally sure that meaningful change is often nonlinear, subjective, and deeply relational, which is why integrating qualitative data and community-defined indicators into our evaluation framework is not just valuable, but necessary. Thank you, Lorraine.
I've lost my mic. Thank you so much, Tita, for this and for discussing about this, like the intricacy between universal and context is so key for us, and it will be also very important as we're considering this work as a public good. We really want that to be a study that people can think about as, does that work in my context? And so being able to identify what is contextual versus what we expect to see in all contexts is just so key. So thank you so much for putting that into perspective so well for us. I'd like to give the floor now to Francesca to start discussing a little bit also implication and applications of this. So from Tostan experience, you've been implementing community empowerment program for decades with significant evidence of impact on social norm change. You have a body of research that is very interesting. And as you're looking at scaling transformative social change, we're thinking maybe how much might the comparative evidence from this study change, in your perspective, how funders think about return on investment in the long term and potentially also process-oriented approaches?
Oh, thank you, Lorraine. That's of course a very big question. And I think before starting, I'd really like to again welcome all the participants, because I'm seeing some participants that I know, but I'm seeing a lot of participants that I don't know. And we're really pleased to have you and to be able to connect with you. Part of the work that we'd like to do in this initiative is actually connecting with a lot of additional individuals, organizations, and so on. And so this is just one platform that allows us to do that. And if you are listening, I think you are interested in social transformation and in social norms change, which has been a passion of mine for many years now, decades. And to be honest, when I have seen over the last 20 years or so, I've been seeing that the vast majority of funding institutions as well as practitioners are giving more attention to social norms and social norms change. I see it in their project proposals all the time, that they raise this as an issue that needs to be addressed. And then they have some, shall I say, quick and trying to be, within 1 or 2 years, trying to make some changes, like identifying what are the norms and what are we going to do to change them from the outside mostly. And then surprise, surprise, I'm also reading that in their project or program or policy reports, that one of the major obstacles in making change has been the persistent social norm changes. The persistent social norms that have not changed. So this continues to be a problem. But we're in a better place than we were 20 years ago because there is much greater appreciation that social transformation is important. What probably we need greater appreciation of is that social change and social transformation and social norm change is sustainable and happens in a good human way that promotes well-being when it comes from within. So it's true, you know, Tita was saying a little while ago that we're looking to see what are the key elements that make the change. Well, we're not starting from scratch. All of the organizations represented here and a lot of the organizations that we are in contact with that are part of the coalition and beyond have a pretty good sense on what makes the change and why the change happens. But the study will generate greater understanding on the one hand, but more, if you will, shareable evidence, shareable in a way that also enables the application of that evidence by others. And to the specific question of how will it change funders? Well, we do hope and trust that as the evidence emerges on how the social change takes place and the importance of that social transformation at the outset of any significant programming venture, that funders will also be able to appreciate that they need to invest in that. They need to support that part of the programming rather than zeroing directly on a sectoral outcome. And we trust that by engaging the funders in this initiative, as well as engaging the practitioners, as well as engaging the moral specialists like many of you, and engaging communities also. So not just, you know, doing the study and then coming out and giving a product, but rather having a 5-year initiative where we are engaging lots of stakeholders constantly and providing support to their reflections and getting their reflections back so that they can inform our study. So we really are setting it up, or trying to set it up as much as possible to have different, to respond to different evidence needs to different stakeholders and engage those stakeholders as we're going along. And here's a very quick synthesis, the 4 stakeholders groups and the intended outcomes. And, you know, directly on the question, Lorraine, what are we hoping in terms of funders? We're hoping that the granting will be done in a little bit different way. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So I hope if anyone is a funder in the room, like, I hope you heard that. No, thanks so much, Francesca. And yeah, definitely key to see how we are thinking about this informing different type of decisions by different actors. I would like now to give the floor to Christina. This is like the last research question that we've not touched upon. And this is about the definition of success. So you're working to enhance One Village partner evidence system while supporting this broader research initiative. And from a male perspective, I think it would be very interesting if you can tell us how might this study finding influence how practitioners design and evaluate their own community-led programs. And so in particular, how are you thinking about around measuring community ownership, participatory processes? These are things that are very difficult to measure. How do you see this study bringing some results in that sense?
Thanks, Lorraine. And hello to everyone. It's such a joy to be here and to get to talk about this really interesting initiative with such a great group of folks. So before answering the question, I just want to give a little bit of background on One Village Partners, the organization I'm representing on this panel, and our approach to monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So One Village Partners works with rural communities in Sierra Leone to develop sustainable solutions to their most pressing self-identified challenges. So as previous speakers have said, this is not restricted to one silo. We've partnered with communities to complete projects in health, education, agriculture, all to address their own prioritized felt needs. And so One Village Partners believes in implementing participatory, community-based evaluation methods for our programs. And we've actually published a few practitioner toolkits on how we went about that, specifically on most significant change and picture-based community-led monitoring, all to balance the need of what data does the community want to see, and then what do we need as internal evaluators to learn about our programs. But then the challenge we're currently facing, and that we're not alone in facing, is how best to measure the impact of our programming in a way that's authentic to holistic community-led development values and resonates with external audiences, and specifically funders, as we've been talking about. So to answer the question, I think it's important to first point out the contrasting views of what defines success. So on one side, we often have funders who define outcomes within a specific field of human well-being. And on the other side, it can feel very us-them. So it can feel on the other side, we have practitioners who are implementing a proven process they've seen work, as Tita mentioned earlier, that helps community members live out lives that matter to them. So evaluators often balance this tension of designing an evaluation that's true to holistic community-led development values, but also meets funder requirements. And as we know, inevitably, this results in compromises, and often those may deprioritize community-defined success metrics. So let's dive deeper into one area that's often a sticking point in holistic community-led development evaluation: how best to measure changes in community ownership and attribution of HCLD participatory processes in those changes. So this study design actually takes this experience into account and will investigate how participants' views of success, say at the beginning of the program, compare with what they reveal at the end of the intervention. And so we're hoping this will reveal outcome areas that may not be evident at baseline, but emerge throughout lived experiences. And understanding this post-intervention insight will offer a critical opportunity to develop evidence-based community success indicators with which to evaluate our interventions. So what does this mean for practitioners, internal evaluators, program design, leadership of these community-led development orgs? This study aims to provide practitioners with evidence-backed, accessible frameworks and tools to measure the success of holistic community-led development programs. It's our hope that the outputs of this study will not only demonstrate the effectiveness of the HCLD model, but will equip practitioners around the world with tools to strengthen their program design and evaluation. We aim to learn from different stakeholders what their understanding of success is and propose a common definition that integrates these diverse perspectives. So the goal is to make conversations with non-implementers of HCLD, especially around changes in social transformation, governance, human development. Let's make those conversations easier and more accessible while not compromising our community definitions of success. And so how will we do it? The study's design is reflective of the values of holistic community-led development and includes many participatory methodologies. This is quite intentional, as we believe these types of methods are key in generating credible evidence of holistic community-led development. And many of us as practitioners and evaluators working in this space have experienced pushback on this type of methodology because they can often be viewed as expensive, as time-consuming, and even that dreaded term of soft science. So we're really trying to use this study to provide those additional credibility with audiences that may not think of those as the best way to evaluate HCLD. So how will we ensure practitioners are involved in defining the tools they need for program design and evaluation? We're privileged to build on the foundational work of the movement of community-led development, which is a network, a global network of CLD implementing organizations whose aim is to shift the power so that low-income communities successfully achieve their own visions and goals. MCLD has been moving the needle on defining holistic community-led development and its measurements through localized research agendas, which aim to generate new evidence and provide decision makers with data for considering integrated approaches to development issues. So with MCLD as a technical advisor to the study and their networks involved, we hope to ensure the practitioner viewpoint remains central in the study design, implementation, and dissemination, so that we generate tools that are useful to address the challenges around measuring HCLD success. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on this, Lorraine. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Christina. And yes, as I said at the beginning, we are really thinking about this work as a way to also bring tools for practitioners. So it's not just about this needs to be a public good, and this needs to bring some learning that can be externally valid, but also bring some tools that can be used by others. So thanks for reinforcing this message, Christina. I actually would like to, we have 10 minutes left, and I would like to give the floor back to Gannon. Gannon, as the senior advisor for the Food Spectrum Coalition, when you're thinking about looking ahead to 2020, to 2030 actually, when this study concludes, because this is really a long journey that we're starting now together. Again, speaking about success, what would success look like for advancing holistic community-led development as a mainstream approach for you? And maybe also thinking, because this is a coalition, in your view, what role might each of your organizations play in that transformation?
Yeah, thanks, Lorraine, and thanks everyone for sharing the thoughts. It's always so fascinating to think about these things fresh and on calls like this with the group around us. I'm going to keep it really short, Lorraine, because I would love to have just a touch of time for questions or comments from folks on the call. And I'll just say again how it really is inspiring. This is one of the first events that we've done as a coalition, in fact, and certainly the first one where we're sharing this level of detail around the evidence and learning piece. And it's really heartening to see that we've got, more than 20 people on this call, and to see your engagement and interest. Like Francesca said, I know some of you, but there's many others that I look forward to meeting. As if you clicked on this, there must be something there for you. Yeah, so between now and 2030, I would say, where are we today? I've come to believe that this is a sector that doesn't know it's a sector. This is a group of organizations all over the world that today, tomorrow, next week are going to be out implementing these kinds of holistic models. But at least based on some of my conversations, they often feel alone. And sometimes they even feel like they're asking themselves, am I crazy? Am I the only one who sees this? That it's deeply efficient and effective to work to build on community success and to build on communities' visions. And so just like 40 years ago, you could say, we work with community health workers, and people would have said, what's a community health worker? I think in the same way, this is a sector and a rich set of practices whose time has come. And if this coalition can play a part in this broader global movement that's taking place around power shifting, community-led development, and so many others that date back so many decades, that would be exciting. Technically speaking, I should share our vision as a coalition, which is a little bit meta. We've said that our vision as a coalition is to see the visions of communities come to life. And that is something that might be described as a thriving future or a thriving world full of thriving leaders and thriving people. We are very soon going to start accepting allies into the coalition. We do everything through a very simple website, which I'm just throwing in the chat. Anyone on this call is very welcome to go on, and we have a simple survey where you can sign up and start to get plugged in. We're planning our first call in July. Yeah, so Lorraine, by 2030, our vision would be that this has become a standard for communities to experience a process that really centers them from beginning until in Ben's diagram, until they're actually the ones who are probably leading and training others and at the forefront. So thank you, and back to you, Lorraine.
Please, Nana, go ahead.
Thank you very much to everyone and to all the panelists. This has been a very interesting conversation. My name is Nana Wanchukwu from Tostan. I'm a little curious and wondering if, this question has come up or has been answered, or there are people who have methodologies or evidence. How do you start to encourage people who work with directly locally with communities to start curating evidence, or to how do you encourage them? Because more often than not, in conversations that I have had, people see evidence collection as an abstract concept, something for knowledge managers, something for trained M&E officials. So in so doing, a lot of local knowledge is lost, a lot of clear understanding at how things can be transferred from one community to the other, or knowledge can be transferred, is lost. How has this been addressed in your experience? Are there things to look at, best practices to observe? How do you start to encourage those really small community-based organizations to document evidence? Thank you.
Thanks, Nana. I think that would be very interesting to hear. So the practitioner in this room, so namely Christina, Tita, Francesca, in your organization, how does that work? So reinforcing the question of Nana, how do you rephrasing it? And I hope I'm not rephrasing badly, but yeah, how do you ensure that when you're starting collecting evidence, you are involving the communities, and yeah, how does that work exactly in practical terms so that they get to understand what is the benefit for them and how they are included in this process? Maybe, yeah, Tita.
I could start briefly, and thank you for such a great question and reflection. And I think this is something that I think all of us are constantly thinking about it, no? And first of all, start with the premise that this is not extractive, it shouldn't be extractive at all. Is it? Because I remember sometimes it's like, you have to tell the story, but what story do you want to tell? What story, what is it, what you want to share? And I think now that I think Legado being more like, I would say, not to say careful, but more intentionally, is it, how can we really document the things that people want to tell, the things that people want to share, instead of like coming with the questions like, I need to fill this out because it needs to go in my webpage. And I say it, and I think some of you have felt it before, but here's like with intention, and also with the love and care and respect for the people. Like we are in this process together. This is a partnership to support community-led development, holistic 360, whatever we call it, depends on where we are. But is it these people at the center sharing their process, sharing the why we're doing this together, and how they're seeing, if they're seeing, of course, that things are being transformed in different ways. So starting from, this is how we were at the beginning, this is how we are now, this is where we are going. That's when we talk about this vision. And are we really there? Where are we in the process? So it's a long response, but in a way, it's like with the respect and care, what are the stories that people want to share? The stories of change, of the stories of transformation that they want to share, instead of coming with the questions as like, I want you to respond this, not because it has to emerge organically from them, but create those spaces for telling and sharing and documenting that in a way that's evidence, and comes from them and not from us as extractors of the information.
Thank you. Sorry, just to rephrase it a little bit, I think I'm looking at, but this is pointing towards that. I'm looking at how the communities themselves, how to encourage them to tell their own stories. Let me give you a little example.
Okay.
When I was very young, when I was growing up, storytelling is a big part of African culture, right?
Yeah.
And we have proverbs like that say that if you don't know where the rain started beating you from, you wouldn't know where it stopped beating you. So it's something, we have proverbs that are aligned with measurement, that are aligned with evidence, that, that we have a culture of evidence. But over a period of time in international development and in, community development, it starts to feel like more extractive, exactly as you said. And I'm wondering, communities still meet, they still hang out together with each other, they still have engagement with each other, with their neighbors and all of that. And I'm wondering, as we encourage communities to lead their own development, are there ways to encourage them without the technicalities of a monitoring and evaluations person? Are there ways to lean into existing culture? Are there ways to lean into tools that they already have to encourage them to be the owners of their own evidence and also be the owners of the distribution of their evidence? So that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana, for your question and for your comment, and totally agree with you. Yeah, they already have the ways, as Gannon was saying, no? And how can we really create those spaces for them to continue doing that, and also to tell the story in the ways they want to do it, and continue doing that, and I would say intergenerational too, because sometimes it gets lost in the elders or is in the schools. But how can we really create those spaces and support those spaces? And that's what I was saying in when I was in my intervention, is like, what are those spaces? What are the ways that you create them? And the inclusion, no, for the different voices, but also with the total respect of the culture and the ways of doing things. Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks for this question and super interesting discussion, actually. We are at time already, and we want to also respect the time and of everyone, but want to thank again so Ben, Tita, Christina, and Francesca for this super interesting discussion and for their reflection. Thank for everyone to your support for joining this and be interested in this coalition and this work. Gannon mentioned we have a website. Please leave your email there if you want to continue following how we continue working and how this initiative unfolds. And we hope to see you soon in different spaces. And yes, and if you have reflection and ideas on the chat, we'll keep this open for the next 5 minutes so that yeah, we'll be able to follow up also. Thanks so much.